Thank you. So this actually involves the Culture of Peace program at the United Nations, as well as peace building and their relationship to the work of Gandhi and King and Mandela and Chavez. So the work at the UN tries to answer two questions. Why do their efforts not work in stopping violence long term? And how can we create lasting peace? And so at the UN, you see the different kinds of peace work in action. There's peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. And those are actually fit into two categories of peace work that, and all of these terms are defined by Johan Galtung, who is a professor of peace studies at University of Oslo in Norway. So peacemaking and peacekeeping are what Galtung called negative peace, which means that they just stop or prevent violence. And they don't work on any long-term change that causes violence. They just want to stop the violence or prevent it. And so thus, this does not, negative peace or peacemaking and peacekeeping do not lead to long-term peace. But they are necessary because often in order to start that work on long-term peace, you have to stop the violence first, or you have to prevent the violence first. Okay, so then there's positive peace, and it's called peace building, and that's the work toward long-term change so violence does not break out again. Okay, so the United Nations has been practicing negative peace for its first 60 years. Then in 2005, it opened the UN Peace Building Commission to focus on peace building. And then in last year, it opened the UN Department of Politics and Peace Building, which combines negative and positive peace. So positive peace, which works on long-term change so that violence doesn't break out again, is largely based on the UN axiom that sustainable or long-term peace, long-term development, and justice are interrelated. They're interdependent. So you can't have one without the others. And that's a very important point to what we'll discuss. So Galtung developed an extensive theory of violence as well as an extensive theory of peace, and one leads into the other. We won't go into the theory of violence right now because we just don't have the time. But according to Galtung, theorized that peace is of two types, negative and positive peace, like we were saying, but he goes on to develop in great detail what those things are. So for example, he says that positive peace requires 6 societal conditions to succeed in order to create long-term change. And those are basically, they're in his writings, they're equity, entropy, symbiosis, broad scope, large domain, and superstructure. And what those actually mean are conditions of equality, where everything applies to everyone in society equally. Inclusiveness, where all segments of society are included in the peace work. Education, and then a supportive infrastructure of, like regular conferences, a supportive bureaucracy, and even a supportive building. And the United Nations fits those requirements, that all these kind of things are necessary for there to be long-term peace. And he also divided positive peace into 3 types. Individual positive peace, which means the focused on the individual. So the individual becomes educated and trained so they choose nonviolent solutions instead of choosing violent solutions. Then there's structural positive peace, which applies to the changing of laws, bureaucracies, governments that choose peaceful solutions instead of oppressive or exploitive or violent solutions. And finally, he talked about cultural positive peace, where instead of changing cultures from cultures of war and violence that glorified guns into culture of peace. So, and finally, Galtung wrote much about how peace studies is not only the academic study of human society and peace, but also, because it leads to solution, is actually a very important form of social therapy for society, help society become better and more peaceful, etc. Now, the relationship to Gandhi King is that it's a very interesting study to see how Gandhi, King, Mandela, Chavez, Mubarak Awad, how they had impact on in terms of individual positive peace, in terms of structural positive peace, and in terms of cultural positive peace, how they led to the changing of laws and governments. And then also their recommendation, their writings were all about changing the culture to a culture of peace. And then the connection to the culture of peace is that Galtung's 6 societal conditions for creating long-term change, equality, inclusiveness, education, supportive infrastructure, exactly matches what's in the culture of peace as represented in UN Resolution 53/243. So those are the connection to those things. And they very much complement each other. And so the next steps is that now civil society is coming up with ways to actually measure peacefulness scientifically. The Institute of Economics and Peace is coming up with a way to measure the socioeconomic factors of peacefulness in any given country or society, group or anything. And the Barrett Value Center, in partnership with Nonviolence International, has come up with a way to measure culture of peace. So since 1989, Barrett Value Center has been measuring cultures in corporations and NGOs and countries and communities, and now they're applying that to the culture of peace. The result is that these scientific methods will give us much more exacting feedback on what the society or the group, whatever, needs to become more peaceful, and thus in more efficient and effective ways to try to create peacefulness. The conclusion is that more than ever, we have the hope to create world peace, accompanied with world prosperity. And the challenge is the funding to pay for this kind of measurement and analysis worldwide, and then to pay for the implementations that come from that analysis, that are recommended by that analysis. But maybe as governments and big business who control the money of the world begin to see that this is the way to actually create better economies long term, then maybe they'll become willing to pay for it. Thank you very much. Yes.